School called at noon. Custodian answered like family. The lunch bell at Jefferson Elementary rang exactly at noon, just like it had for the past 37 years. But today was different. Today, the sound mixed with something else, the broken sob of a 10-year-old boy sitting in the nurse's office, holding the pieces of his world together with shaking hands. Luis Mendoza pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to stop the tears that wouldn't listen. His backpack lay beside him like a wounded animal, its zipper torn wide open, books and papers spilling onto the floor like secrets he couldn't keep anymore. The math test from this morning stuck out from the pile, a big red F marked across the top like a scar. It was the second time he had failed the same test, the second time he had let everyone down in the main office. Chaos ruled like a storm nobody could control. Mrs. Patterson, the secretary, was on 3 phone calls at once, her glasses sliding down her nose as she tried to handle a parent complaint about bus routes while typing an urgent email about next week's fire drill. 2 teachers stood at the counter, filling out incident reports about a playground fight that had happened during morning recess. The principal, Mr. Johnson, was locked in his office with an angry parent, whose voice carried through the closed door like thunder. The nurse, Mrs. Chen, looked at Luis with worried eyes, but had 3 other kids waiting, one with a bloody nose, another holding her stomach, and a kindergartner who had thrown up on his shoes. She touched Luis's shoulder gently. "Sweetie, I need to call someone for you. Who should I call?" But Luis just shook his head. His mom was at her second job, the one at the hospital where she cleaned rooms and couldn't answer her phone. His dad had left 2 years ago, promising to come back, but never did. His grandmother spoke only Spanish and got confused when the school called. There was nobody who could come, nobody who would understand. That's when the jingling started, soft at first, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, then louder as heavy boots walked down the hallway. Mr. Rivera appeared in the doorway, his custodian uniform slightly dusty from fixing the broken water fountain in the 3rd grade hallway. His keys hung from his belt like a collection of tiny bells, each one opening a different door in the school, but more importantly, each one representing the trust the school had placed in him over his 15 years of service. He was 62 years old, with silver hair that he kept neat under his baseball cap and hands that showed the marks of honest work, rough and strong but gentle when they needed to be. He looked at the chaos in the office, saw Mrs. Chen, overwhelmed with sick children, noticed the teachers stressed with paperwork, heard the angry parent in the principal's office. Then his eyes found Luis, small and broken in that big chair, trying to disappear into himself, without hesitation, without asking permission, without checking if it was his job. Mr. Rivera walked over to the boy. "I've got him," he said to Mrs. Chen, and those 3 words carried more weight than any formal authorization could. He meant it the way a father means it when he picks up his crying child, the way a grandfather means it when he promises to fix a broken toy, the way family means it when they show up without being asked. Mr. Rivera knelt down beside Luis, his knees creaking slightly from years of mopping floors and climbing ladders. He didn't say anything at first. He just started picking up the scattered contents of the backpack, handling each item like it mattered, because to Luis, it did. The Pokemon cards that Luis traded at lunch, carefully placing them back in their protective sleeve, the library book about dinosaurs, checking to make sure the pages weren't torn, the crumpled homework assignments, smoothing them out with patient hands. When he picked up the failed math test, he studied it for a moment, his eyes scanning the problems, seeing where Luis had tried and failed again. "This backpack," Mr. Rivera said finally, examining the torn zipper. "I can fix this." He stood up, his hand gentle on Luis's shoulder. "Come on, mijo. Let's go to my workroom." Luis looked up, confused. Teachers had workrooms. The principal had an office. But the custodian, Mr. Rivera smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made you feel safe, like everything really would be okay. Best room in the whole school, he said. It's got everything we need. The workroom was tucked away in the basement, past the boiler room and the storage area where they kept the extra desks. Louise had never been down here before. It smelled like cleaning supplies and WD-40, but also something else, coffee and something sweet. Mr. Rivera's space was organized chaos. Tools hanging on pegboards, supplies sorted into labeled boxes, and in the corner, a small desk with a coffee maker, a radio playing soft Spanish music, and pictures. Lots of pictures. Children and grandchildren, Louise guessed, all smiling at the camera. But there were other pictures too, students from the school. Kids in graduation caps, teenagers in sports uniforms, young adults in military uniforms, or holding college diplomas. My kids, Mr. Rivera said, noticing Louise looking, not by blood, but family, all the same. He pulled out his cart, the one he pushed through the hallways every day, and found a package of heavy-duty zip ties. These things, he said, holding them up, can fix anything. Broken chairs, loose fence posts, and definitely backpacks. He worked carefully, threading the zip ties through the zipper pulls, creating a new way to close the bag. It wasn't pretty, but it was strong. Stronger than before, even. While he worked, he talked. You know, when I first came to this country, I didn't speak any English. Not a word. I was older than you, maybe 13, and they put me in school with kids half my age because I couldn't understand the teacher. Math was the worst. The numbers looked the same, but the way they taught it, all in English, it might as well have been magic spells. Luis watched Mr. Rivera's hands work, steady and sure. But you learned, Luis said quietly, his first words since the office. Mr. Rivera nodded. I did. You want to know how? He finished with the backpack, testing it several times to make sure it would hold. Then he noticed the scrape on Luce's hand, probably from when he fell at recess. The incident that had started everything going wrong today. Without asking, he pulled out a first aid kit from his cartove. Course he had one, and began cleaning the wound with careful precision. I learned because someone taught me the way I needed to learn. Not from a book, not from a board, but right here. He tapped his chest, over his heart. And here. He tapped his temple. Someone who understood that sometimes you need to see things differently to understand them. The antiseptic stung. But Luis didn't pull away. Mr. Rivera's touch was gentle, like Luis remembered his grandfather's being before he passed away last year. Your math test, Mr. Rivera said, securing a bandage over the scrape. Want to show me where it goes wrong? Luis felt his chest tighten. I'm stupid, he said, the words coming out harsh and painful. Everyone knows it. I failed it twice. The same test. Even Kevin passed it, and he never studies. Mr. Rivera finished with the bandage and looked Luis straight in the eyes. Hey, he said firmly but kindly. You're not stupid. Don't ever say that about yourself. Your brain just works differently. That's not bad, it's just different. Like being left-handed or having brown eyes instead of blue. Different isn't wrong. He pulled out a roll of paper towels from his cart and grabbed a black marker from his desk. Come on, let's sit. Right there, on the hallway floor outside his workroom. Mr. Rivera sat down, his back against the wall. After a moment's hesitation, Luis sat beside him. The floor was cool through his jeans, and he could hear the distant sounds of the cafeteria above them, kids laughing and talking, living their normal lives while his felt like it was falling apart. Mr. Rivera spread out a paper towel and drew a simple rectangle. This, he said, is a garden, like the one my grandfather had in Mexico. Now, if this garden is 12 feet long and 8 feet wide, and I want to build a fence around it, how much fence do I need? Luis stared at the rectangle. This was exactly like problem number 3 on his test, the one about calculating perimeter. On the test, with its formal language and printed diagrams, It had seemed impossible. But here, on a paper towel, with Mr. Rivera's voice calm and patient beside him, something clicked. "You walk around it," Luis said slowly. 12 feet, then 8 feet, then 12 feet again, then 8 feet to get back where you started. Mr. Rivera smiled. "Exactly. So how much is that altogether?" Luis counted on his fingers, the way his teachers said he shouldn't, but the way that made sense to him. 12 plus 12 is 20. 8 plus 8 is 16. 24 plus 16 is ... double quotes. He paused, thinking. 40 feet of fence. Mr. Rivera drew a small star on the paper towel. "Perfect. See? You knew it all along. You just needed to see it your way." They worked through 3 more problems like that. Mr. Rivera turning abstract math into stories about real things, dividing pizza among friends, figuring out how many tiles to buy for a bathroom floor, calculating how many minutes until school ended. Each time Luis understood a little more, not because the math changed, but because the way he saw it did. After about 10 minutes, Mr. Rivera pulled out his personal cell phone, the one with the cracked screen protector and the photo of his grandchildren as the wallpaper. "What's your mom's number, Mia?" Luis rattled it off, surprised he remembered it when everything else in his head felt jumbled. Mr. Rivera dialed, waited, then began speaking in soft, flowing Spanish. Luis understood most of it. His grandmother had made sure he knew Spanish, said it was important to remember where you came from. "Sí, Senora Mendoza. It's Alberto Rivera from the school." No, está bien. Luis is fine. He had a hard morning, but he's okay now. His backpack broke, but I fixed it. "No, Mia, don't leave work. I'll stay with him until you get here. No es molestia. Para nada. He's a good boy. Just needed a little help. Sir, he's right here." He handed the phone to Luis. His mother's voice, tired but warm with worry and love, filled his ear. "Luis, baby, are you okay? Mr. Rivera says you had a tough day." Luis felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't tears of frustration or shame. "I'm okay, Mom. Mr. Rivera, he helped me with everything." He could hear her relief, could picture her in her hospital scrubs, probably standing in some hallway, taking a break she couldn't afford to check on her son. "That's good, Mia. That's so good. You listen to Mr. Rivera, okay? I'll be there as soon as my shift ends." They said their goodbyes, their I love yous, and Luis handed the phone back. Mr. Rivera stood up, his joints protesting slightly, and offered Luis a hand up. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you back to class. But first, ... He went to his desk and pulled out the math test Luis had failed. "May I?" Luis nodded, not sure what Mr. Rivera was going to do. The custodian took his marker and wrote something at the top of the page, next to the big red F. Then he folded it carefully and handed it to Luis. "Give this to your teacher. Tell her you're ready to try again." Luis looked at the folded paper, afraid to open it, afraid to hope. "But what if I fail again?" Mr. Rivera put his hand on Luis's shoulder, firm and reassuring. "Then you try again, and again, and again. That's not failing, Mia. That's learning. The only real failure is giving up, and you didn't give up. You're here, you're trying, and that makes you braver than you know." They walked back up the stairs together, Mr. Rivera's keys jingling with each step like a small celebration. The hallways were quiet now, everyone in their classrooms, the afternoon lessons underway. Luce's classroom was at the end of the second-floor hallway, Mrs. Anderson's 4th grade. Through the small window in the door, Luis could see his classmates working on something, heads bent over their desks. He felt his stomach twist with anxiety. They all knew he had failed the test. They had seen him run out when Mrs. Anderson handed them back, had heard Kevin laugh and say, "How do you fail the same test twice?" Mr. Rivera seemed to sense his fear. "You want to know a secret?" he asked, his voice low and conspiratorial. Luis nodded. Every single person in that room has failed at something. Every one. The difference is what they do next. You're going back in there, head high, ready to try again. That makes you special. Mr. Rivera knocked on the door, and Mrs. Anderson came over, her face showing surprise at seeing the custodian with Luis. Mr. Rivera spoke quietly to her, handed her the folded test, and Luis saw something change in his teacher's expression. She looked at Luis differently, not with pity or frustration, but with something like understanding, maybe even pride. Luis, she said gently, welcome back. We're working on the review for tomorrow's science quiz. Your desk partner saved your handout. Luis started to go in, then stopped. He turned back to Mr. Rivera, and without thinking, without caring who might see, he hugged him. Not a quick, embarrassed kid hug, but a real one. The kind you give when someone has saved you from drowning and you're finally on solid ground. Mr. Rivera hugged him back, strong and sure. You've got this, mijo, he whispered. I believe in you. Luis sat at his desk, and something amazing happened. Kevin, the same boy who had laughed at him that morning, leaned over and whispered, Mr. Rivera's cool, huh? He helped me last year when things were bad. He's good people. Sarah, who sat in front of him, turned around and smiled. I'm glad you're back, she said simply. Even Mrs. Anderson seemed different, stopping by his desk to make sure he understood the science material, her hand brief but comforting on his shoulder. When the final bell rang at 3 o'clock, Luis packed up his things in his zip-tied backpack, proud of its new battle scars. He was one of the last to leave, taking his time, and as he walked past Mrs. Anderson's desk, she called him over. Luis, she said, holding up his math test. Mr. Rivera had written something next to the F. This student is ready to show what he really knows. He just needs to be asked in the right way. AR below that, Mrs. Anderson had written, retake scheduled for tomorrow. You've got this, Luis. As Luis walked down the hallway toward the exit, he passed Mr. Rivera's supply closet. The door was open, and the custodian was inside, organizing supplies for tomorrow's cleaning. Luis stopped, knocked on the door frame. Mr. Rivera. The older man looked up, smiled that warm smile. Hey me, good rest of the day. Luis nodded. I wanted to say thank you, again, for everything. Mr. Rivera set down the box he was holding and came to the door. You don't need to thank me, Luis. That's what family does. We show up for each other. He paused, then added, you know, my workshop is always open if you need a quiet place to study, or if you just need someone to talk to. Sometimes the hallway floor is the best classroom in the school. Luis felt something warm bloom in his chest, something that had been cold and scared all day. Family? He asked, the word feeling both foreign and perfectly right. Mr. Rivera nodded. Family doesn't always mean blood, Mia. Sometimes it means the people who see you struggling and choose to help. The people who believe in you when you can't believe in yourself. The people who fix your backpack and your confidence with the same careful hands. Luce's mother arrived 15 minutes later, still in her hospital scrubs, looking tired but relieved when she saw Luis waiting in the office, backpack intact, a small smile on his face. She had been prepared to see her son broken, defeated by another hard day in a series of hard years since his father left. Instead, she found him working on math problems on a paper towel, using the method Mr. Rivera had shown him. Mom, Luis said, jumping up. Look, I understand it now. Mr. Rivera showed me. It's about seeing it differently, not about being smart or stupid, just different. She looked at the paper towel, covered in rectangles and numbers, stars marking correct answers. Her English wasn't perfect, but she understood math, and more importantly, she understood the light in her son's eyes that hadn't been there this morning. Where is this Mr. Rivera? She asked Mrs. Patterson, who was finally done with her phone calls and was getting ready to leave for the day. Alberto? Alberto. He's probably in his workroom or checking the building before he locks up. He's always the last to leave. Luz's mother took his hand. Come, mijo. We need to thank him properly. They found Mr. Rivera in the cafeteria, pushing his wide broom across the floor, earbuds in, humming along to something only he could hear. When he saw them, he pulled out his earbuds, smiled. Señora Mendoza, he said warmly. Your boy did good today. Real good. Luz's mother's eyes filled with tears. In rapid Spanish, she thanked him, blessed him, called him an angel. Mr. Rivera just shook his head, embarrassed by the praise. No, no, he said, switching between Spanish and English. Luis did the work. I just reminded him he could, but Luz's mother wouldn't accept that. She knew what it meant for someone to see your child struggling and choose to help. She knew what it meant for someone to take time they didn't have to give hope that was desperately needed. You gave him more than help with math, she said in careful English. You gave him ... double quotes. She searched for the word. Dignity. Respect. You made him feel valuable. Mr. Rivera's eyes grew soft. Every child is valuable, señora. Sometimes the world makes them forget. It's our job to remind them. He looked at Luis. You remember what I told you? My door is always open. And tomorrow, you're going to ace that math test. But even if you don't, you're going to keep trying. That's what counts. As they left the building, Luis, walking between his mother and the fading afternoon sun, he looked back at the school. Through the cafeteria windows, he could see Mr. Rivera, back to his work, pushing his broom in steady strokes. To anyone passing by, he would look like just a custodian, doing his job, cleaning up after kids. But Luis knew better now. He was so much more than that. He was the person who answered when the school called at noon, not because it was his job, but because it was right. He was the one who fixed backpacks with zip ties and hearts with patient words. He was the one who turned paper towels into classrooms and saw potential where others saw failure. He was family, in the truest sense of the word, not bound by blood or obligation, but by choice and compassion. That night, as Luis worked on his math homework at the kitchen table while his mother cooked dinner, he thought about Mr. Rivera's wall of pictures, all those kids who had become his family. Over the years, Luis wondered if his picture would ever be up there. Then he realized it didn't matter if his picture made it to the wall. What mattered was that Mr. Rivera had already made him part of something bigger, a family that existed in the hallways and workrooms of Jefferson Elementary. A family that caught you when you fell and helped you stand back up, stronger than before. When his mother asked him what he was smiling about, Luis just said, I'm thinking about family. She assumed he meant her, maybe his grandmother, the cousins they saw on weekends. And he did mean them. But he also meant the custodian with jingling keys, who had answered the call at noon, stepped in when the world was chaos, and reminded a broken boy that he was worth fixing, worth teaching, worth loving. The next morning, Luis arrived at school early. He had barely slept, but not from worry, from excitement. He wanted to see Mr. Rivera, to show him the math homework he had completed. All correct answers marked with stars he had drawn himself. He found him in the main hallway, setting up the wet floor signs before mopping. Mr. Rivera, Luis called out, running up with his homework. The custodian's face broke into a wide smile. Look at this, mijo, you did it. All of them, right? He held the paper like it was a treasure, and to Luis, that's exactly what Mr. Rivera's pride felt like, treasure. You keep this up, Mr. Rivera said, handing the homework back. And you're going to be teaching me math soon. During math class, Mrs. Anderson gave Luis his makeup test. It was the same problems, just in a different order. But this time, Luis saw them differently. He saw gardens that needed fences, pizzas that needed sharing, floors that needed tiles. He took his time, showed his work the way Mr. Rivera had taught him on the paper towel. And when he was done, he felt something he hadn't felt about math in a long time: confidence. Mrs. Anderson graded it right there, while the other students worked on their reading. When she handed it back, there was a big B+ at the top, and next to it, a smiley face. "I knew you could do it," she whispered. Mr. Rivera was right too, just needed to be asked in the right way. At lunch, Luis didn't sit alone like he usually did. Kevin invited him to his table, and Sarah saved him a seat. They talked about normal kid things: video games, the upcoming field trip, whether the cafeteria's pizza was actually pizza or cardboard with cheese. But when Luis saw Mr. Rivera walk by, checking on a spill someone had reported, he stood up. "Mr. Rivera," he called out. The custodian turned, smiled. Luis held up his test, the B+ visible even from across the cafeteria. Mr. Rivera gave him a thumbs up, and Luis could see the pride in his eyes, the same pride Luis imagined a father would have. The other kids at the table noticed. "Mr. Rivera's the best," Kevin said. "He taught me to fix my bike last year." Sarah nodded. "He helped me when I lost my library book. Searched the whole school with me until we found it." Story after story came out, and Luis realized that Mr. Rivera had been answering calls for help long before yesterday at noon. He had been showing up for kids, being family, for years. That afternoon, Luce's mother got a call at work. She saw the school's number, and her heart dropped, remembering yesterday's crisis. But when she answered, it was Mrs. Anderson, calling with good news. Luis had passed his makeup test. More than passed, he had shown real understanding. Whatever Mr. Rivera did yesterday, the teacher said, it worked. Luis came back, a different student. Not different like changed, but different like unlocked, like he finally believes in himself. Luce's mother cried right there in the hospital break room. Happy tears that washed away months of worry. Her son was going to be okay. Not because his problems were magically fixed, but because someone had shown him he was worth the effort to fix them. Years later, when Luis graduated from high school, Mr. Rivera was there, sitting in the back row with his wife, taking pictures like Luis was his own grandson. Luis had invited him specially, hand-delivering the invitation to the workroom that had become his refuge through elementary school. By then, Mr. Rivera had officially retired, but he still volunteered at Jefferson Elementary, still fixed backpacks with zip ties, still taught math on paper towels to kids who needed to see things differently. When Luis walked across that stage to get his diploma, he looked out at the crowd. His mother was there, crying happy tears. His grandmother, still speaking mostly Spanish, but proud in any language. And Mr. Rivera, the custodian, who had answered when nobody else could, who had shown up like family, because that's what family does. Luis went on to college, studied to become a teacher, not because he was the smartest or the best at school, but because he had learned that sometimes the most important lessons don't come from textbooks or worksheets. Sometimes they come from custodians with jingling keys who see a broken kid and decide to fix more than just his backpack. In his college application essay, Luis wrote about that day in 4th grade when everything fell apart and someone unexpected put it back together. He wrote about how Mr. Rivera had taught him that family doesn't need a title or a blood connection. Family just shows up. The admissions board later said it was one of the most moving essays they had ever read. When Luis became a teacher himself, he kept a roll of paper towels and a black marker in his desk drawer. Whenever a student struggled, when the traditional way wasn't working, he would sit on the floor with them and find a different way. He would tell them about Mr. Rivera, about how being different isn't wrong, about how everyone needs someone to believe in them when they can't believe in themselves. And sometimes, when the school called at noon because a child was falling apart, Mr. Luis Mendoza would answer. Not because it was his job, there were counselors and administrators for that. He would answer because that's what Mr. Rivera had taught him. Family doesn't wait for permission. Family doesn't check if it's convenient. Family just shows up, with zip ties and patience, with paper towels and belief, with the understanding that sometimes the most important thing you can say to a struggling child is 3 simple words. I've got him. The school where Louise teaches now has a custodian named James. He's young, just starting out, focused on keeping the floors clean and the trash cans empty. But Louise is teaching him, slowly, that the job is about more than maintenance. It's about maintaining hope. It's about seeing the kids who are invisible, the ones falling through cracks, the ones who need someone to answer when their world calls for help at noon. Louise tells James about Mr. Rivera, about the wall of pictures, about the workroom that was a sanctuary. And slowly, James is starting to understand. He fixed a kindergartner's broken toy last week. He helped a 3rd grader look for her lost retainer yesterday. Small things, but Louise knows how they add up, how they become big things, how they become family. Louise still visits Mr. Rivera, now in his 80s, living in a small house covered with pictures of his kids, hundreds of them, from over the years. Luce's picture is there too, from his high school graduation, standing between his mother and Mr. Rivera, all of them smiling. When Louise told him he had become a teacher, that he was passing on what he had learned that day on the hallway floor, Mr. Rivera had cried. That's all I ever wanted, he said, for my kids to remember that everyone deserves someone who shows up for them. They sit on Mr. Rivera's porch now, the old custodian and the young teacher, and talk about the kids they're helping. The family's there, creating one act of kindness at a time. The keys don't jingle from Mr. Rivera's belt anymore, but the memory of their sound still echoes in the hallways of Jefferson Elementary, where a plaque by the janitor's closet reads, Alberto Rivera, Custodian, 2008 to 2023. But more importantly, family to all. The story that started when the school called at noon continues every day, in every school where someone sees a child struggling and decides to answer. Not because they have to, but because they understand what Mr. Rivera knew all along. That sometimes the most important education happens outside the classroom. That the best teachers don't always have teaching degrees. And that real family is defined not by blood or obligation, but by the simple, powerful act of showing up when someone needs you most. In schools across the city, across the state, across the country, there are Mr. Riveras. They might be custodians or cafeteria workers, security guards or crossing guards. They're the ones who see the invisible kids, who answer the calls that aren't their responsibility, who understand that education is about more than grades and tests. It's about teaching kids that they matter, that they're valued, that someone will always answer when they call for help. And in a 4th grade classroom in a different school, a boy named Marcus is failing his math test for the 2nd time. He's about to run out, about to give up, when his teacher, Mr. Mendoza, kneels beside his desk. Hey, the teacher says gently, pulling out a paper towel and a marker. Let me show you a different way. Let me tell you about someone special who taught me that different isn't wrong, it's just different. His name was Mr. Rivera, and he answered when I needed help. Now I'm here to answer for you. The cycle continues. The family grows, and somewhere, in a place beyond knowing, Mr. Alberto Rivera's spirit smiles, his keys jingling softly, knowing that his legacy lives on in every child who was saved by someone who simply said, I've got him, and meant it with all their heart.